It has been 26 years since the last entry in Fatal Fury, SNK's first fighting game franchise that set the table for everything that came after, such as Art of Fighting, King of Fighters, and yes, even Aggressors of Dark Combat. Thankfully, the series was kept alive during that quarter-century drought by making sure that Terry, Joe, and most importantly of all, Mai, regularly appeared in KOF titles or other random spin-offs, reminding everybody that Southtown's hungry wolves were just biding their time until the moment was right for their return. Well, that return is now. Fatal Fury: City of the Wolves has been released on PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox Series, and PC, which is the version that I've sunk my fangs into for the last week and am now ready to tell you if it was worth the lengthy wait. So get ready to knuckle up, Southtowners, cause it's going to be a wild ride.
Power wave! Dragon Taco! Burn Knuckle! Are you okay? Wow!
Making a sequel 26 years after the last entry in whatever medium you're specializing in is always a risky proposition. Do you try to re-establish things with a completely fresh take, present an all-star best of nostalgia fest, or do you act like almost zero time had passed and you're directly following up what came before? Well, SNK seems like they're attempting to do all three in various different ways, and you can see that through the modes, features, and content that City of the Wolves has to offer, so let's break them down. If you're more of a casual fan and are looking to get into the series a bit before diving online, well, you have two main options. There's Arcade Mode, which gives you 6 different opponents to fight through, which is then capped off by a final boss I'm not going to spoil here. Arcade is of course a mode you expect in any modern or even retro fighter, but this one in particular really shines, which is something I'll go into a bit later on. Your other big option for single player shenanigans just so happens to be the most ambitious one SNK has ever made, and that's Episodes of Southtown. This is a really interesting mode that's 75% fighting game, 25% RPG, and 100% Fatal Fury. So if you really want to engross yourself in the characters and the world, this is where you're going to want to spend a big chunk of your time. You then of course have a fully featured online suite, featuring ranked, casual, private rooms, leaderboards, and a new feature, Clone Fights. This essentially lets you fight ghost data of other players, so think Shadows from KI 2013. Now, during the time I've been playing and reviewing this, there's been very few players available to fight online. I haven't encountered that evil Wazzler guy, for example, so I can't report yet on how the experience will be on launch day. I am hopeful that this will have further improvements over Beta 2, which was thankfully considerably better than Beta 1. I'll post a pinned comment on this video about my findings once I'm able to get a good batch of matches in to see how the connections hold up. The tutorial and practice modes are also fully featured, but there's no real surprises or innovations in them either, so it's about what you'd expect. If you prefer your Fatal Fury action live and in person, Versus Mode has 2 options, with one of them being brand new, and that is Special Versus, which lets you tweak various parameters, which results in some pretty crazy matchups. You can make it so single super moves instantly KO your opponent regardless of their health, give each other an endless amount of super meter, change the overall attack strength, plenty of stuff to keep things spicy, although I would have liked to have seen even more. Outside of that, SNK also saw fit to add in a long-requested feature that has been lacking in many modern fighting games, that being Color Edit, which lets you change pretty much everything about each fighter's default palette, and allows you to save your creations in a number of custom slots. In much the same vein, they also went absolutely crazy with the Jukebox, which contains over 300 tracks across all, and I mean all prior Fatal Fury games, with the Art of Fighting series and a few others thrown in there as a bonus. You can assign any track you want to every part of the game you want, so again, this is really robust stuff, and it's all here at launch. As for the lineup of legendary wolves at your disposal, Well, the default roster is composed of 17 characters, and just in case you weren't aware, the first season of DLC, 5 fighters in all, is coming to City of the Wolves post-launch for free. SNK confirmed they are currently committing to releasing a new character every 2 months, a pace I really hope they can maintain, as a rather hot topic of late in the fighting game scene has centered around DLC calendars for pretty much every fighting game being inconsistent at best, so I hope Fatal Fury can steer clear of all of that. So that's a quick rundown of everything that City of the Wolves has to offer at launch and coming in the immediate future, and honestly, it's a bit more than I was initially expecting, as most of the features I just outlined have a lot more depth than you'd think, so do allow me to detail exactly what I thought Fatal Fury excels in, and then we'll move on to the bits that I feel need a bit more work. While a lot of how City of the Wolves plays is built off the mechanics of the original Garou, SNK added a ton more on top of it. The rev meter, hidden gears, wild punishes. Honestly though, if you vibed with how Garou 1 played, then you'll be comfortable here. And while there's certainly some similarities between the rev gauge and Street Fighter VI's drive system, Fatal Fury does plenty more that's unique to it, and I think offers a bit more mechanical depth to boot. Its speed, the weight of the characters, the impact of the attacks and the combos, you could say that the game feel is all incredibly solid and satisfying. Now, I do think there may be 1 or 2 mechanics too many and that it can get confusing, especially for first-time players, but I think the positives of so many techniques outweighs the negatives, because when you have a ton of offensive options and equally a ton of defensive ones, the moment-to-moment gameplay can become immensely exciting and spontaneous. Now, it is way too early in the game's life to see where the meta is going to go, but as of right now, I'm digging the way things currently are, as there's still a lot to learn and optimize, so I don't think things are going to stagnate anytime soon. This is especially true when you consider they also brought back the glorious line or 2-lane battle system, which of course is a throwback to the classic games. And while it's essentially locked to a single stage right now, it's still great to see it back. The commands to navigate around both lanes aren't as elegant as I feel they could be, but I love that they took the time to include this, as it inches City of the Wolves away from being just a Garou sequel and into more of a celebration of Fatal Fury itself. Thankfully, this nostalgic wink extends to the visuals as well, which as you can see are rather eye-popping. And yeah, while 2D sprites have a charm that polygons can never truly replicate, this is by far SNK's best looking 3D game to date, bursting with color coming out of pretty much everywhere, really solid animation, tons of over-the-top hit sparks, and all wrapped up in an American comic book meets anime style presentation. Now, while Street Fighter VI and Tekken 8 are obviously more accomplished in a graphical fidelity sense, I prefer the overall look of City of the Wolves, as it has this sort of fusion of the old and the new. Now, that nostalgia I mentioned earlier, well, that applies to the background stages as well, which needs a bit of an explanation. Many of Garou's locations had a darker, seedier look about them, and while City of the Wolves incorporates many of those same locations, it also adds a smattering of new Southtown landmarks that harken back to the older Fatal Furies, like the Real Bout Saga. Lots of bright colors, plenty of palm trees, tons of cheery onlookers. It very much reminds me of the breezy vibes of those older games, but also retains those sketchy areas you don't want to find yourself in at night either. So again, a bit of the old and a bit of the new, while still also being old somehow. Now, speaking of the iconic city, I'd like to move on to something that I think will surprise some people, that being the main single-player mode episodes of Southtown. I didn't know what I was expecting at first, but I very quickly became addicted to the constant hustle and bustle that's available here, as there's always something to do, learn about, level up, and of course, plenty of fights. You're basically given a giant map of 3 different regions that unlock one after another, with each one containing tons of missions and points of interest, with the overall goal being to complete the story or episode. The story in question, though, is determined by who you pick, which, to my surprise, was unique for every fighter. So, for example, Mai's reasons for returning to Southtown are quite different from Terry's, and so will be the characters that they both meet and converse with. The progress is largely the same between every campaign, where you take on various familiar faces and move on to the next region, but there's quite a few unique surprises along the way. Fights start off against a bevy of jobbers, but then get increasingly difficult as you progress, with more and more stipulations and winning conditions being layered on top, like squaring off against teams of 3, raid-like super enemies that only have a small chance of taking damage, and even a few cheeky minigames. You can then level yourself up with various unlockable skills and buffs, while also being taught core mechanics, like the SPG system, and in addition to all that, you can learn about various Southtown locales, with info boxes teeming with factoids and fighter commentary. Interactions with main characters results in plenty of text-based conversations, which honestly I didn't mind, as it packs in a ton of backstory without stretching the game's budget or scope too far. Develop smarter, not harder, I say. I'd estimate it took about 3 hours to explore just one character's campaign in this mode, so if you multiply that by everyone in the roster, it quickly adds up to a ton of content, especially since each campaign has specific unlockables. Before I knew it, I was addicted to episodes of Southtown because it's not dissimilar to the core appeal of SF6's World Tour, which was all about exploring various hub areas, talking to rival fighters, and of course the expected fisticuffs. But this gets you to the action and streamlines the experience down in the best way possible, as it cuts down the grind tremendously and doesn't have you wandering back and forth through loading screens. And as stated earlier, you can play through a different narrative with each and every character rather than the one singular plot of SF6. Sure, it's not as glitzy and it doesn't contain the same breadth of activities, but it still very much delivers the goods, and it contains plenty of hidden stuff that SNK has been holding close to the chest, believe you me. If you want a more bite-sized experience though, Fatal Fury's traditional arcade mode is immensely satisfying, and I consider myself a fine appreciator of a good arcade mode. You're given an opening cutscene narrated by Kine, who then introduces your chosen character and why they're fighting, which is different from the reasoning given in the episodes of Southtown. Each fighter in the latter then gets their own cinematic comic book style cutscene, culminating in a rival fight that again plays out with tons more story. Beat that character and you then have to take on the final boss, whom again I will not spoil. Character endings, judging from the bunch I've already unlocked, are all really lengthy as well, with some going on for several minutes, and even featuring a ton of cameos, similar to what was seen in KOF 15, but with much better production value. And pardon the constant comparisons here, but this does make Street Fighter 6's arcade mode look a little bare bones by comparison, so it's nice that SNK took a lot more care in this department. Moving on, I was also blown away by City of the Wolves' color edit mode, as you can change almost anything from hair tones, accessories, your main costume parts of course, and even eye color, so it's super easy to navigate and use. And if you don't like any of the default color options for Be Jenny, for example, you can just make your own, which will really let online players express their individuality. Including this feature again shows the extra amount of effort that SNK took with this new entry in one of their oldest legacy franchises. However, there are a few things I was not 100% happy with, and while some of these concerns are minor and others will inevitably be subjective, I still have to mention them as this is a review after all.
Any questions?
While I get every game needs to be marketed and to the widest audience possible, I am still very sternly against shoehorning in real-life celebrities as playable fighting game characters. The inclusion of Cristiano Ronaldo and Salvatore Ganacci feels So forced and unnecessary, and honestly detracts from the default roster a good bit. It's especially egregious because they are taking up slots that could have been filled by the last two remaining characters from the original Garo, Jae-hoon and Freeman. If this marketing deal absolutely had to happen though, I think background NPCs or quest givers in episodes of Southtown would have been more than suitable enough roles for these two. And for further context, in the debate of characters over functions, I'm pretty firmly in the former camp. Now, it's fine if others prefer playstyles and moves over who is performing them, but I prefer a balance of both, and these two real-lifers hurt the game more rather than help it, in my opinion. I just get a big bang of Danica Patrick, don't you? I mean, at least SNK has gone ahead of this a little bit by saying that through future DLC seasons, they plan to include almost all classic fan favorite characters from Fatal Fury into this roster, which I sincerely hope means Freeman, Jae-hoon, and our beloved King of Kings.
Perhaps all of your favorite characters are coming back.
Bro, that's like, I already got 10 named in my head.
I really wish this whole thing hadn't happened in the first place, but it is what it is, I guess. I'm just hoping that they don't continue down this bizarre path at all going forward. Now, there's two other issues in City of the Wolves that I was kinda surprised about, and not in the good way. After the feedback from the first beta, I constantly saw people complaining about Terry's stage, and how it would mess with vision and focus thanks to these slower frame rates of all the background scrolling elements. Now, the slower FPS is present in all the stages, but they're barely noticeable because they're all applied to NPCs or stationary objects. But the scrolling parts of Terry's stage and their various speeds causes visual issues for some, me included. Like, I can sort of deal with it, but it's really not optimal. So I'm kinda shocked that this wasn't addressed in the final game, and while it's nice when you fight online you can make it so Terry's stage never appears, you can't do so in any of the single player modes. The final thing I hope can be addressed in a future patch or update is the option to switch between English or Japanese VO on a character-by-character basis. As of right now, you can have one or the other, which unfortunately means if you like Rock's English voice acting like I do, but prefer Mai in Japanese, you can't switch per character, which has been a feature in Street Fighter ever since SF4. I like the performances of both languages, don't get me wrong, but I still find it a bit odd that an option that's been standard in the games of SNK's closest rival for the last 16 years wasn't included here. Now, with all the positives and negatives out in the open, and as a big fan of Fatal Fury, do I find this a worthy entry in the series?
Here's my answer!
Well, that would be a yes. I was initially concerned that the game would only really aspire to be a direct sequel to Mark of the Wolves and nothing more, but thankfully, after experiencing the full package, I'm glad to see that's not the case, especially since my favorite feature in the entire franchise—
Get in there, Chinchonre!
was recently teased to be coming back in the future. City of the Wolves looks great, feels great, pays homage to the series' legacy, and has plenty of content at launch. Honestly, aside from the two roster spots being, in my opinion, wasted on forced short-term marketing gimmicks, as an overall package, it still delivers pretty much everything you can want in an SNK fighter. I'm really excited to see how the game will evolve or change in the coming years because its many references to Art of Fighting and Mr. Big being added post-launch, not to mention Ken and Chun-Li, means that almost anything is on the table. But let's make sure not everything will be on the table, yeah? So thanks to super in-depth fighting mechanics, appealing visuals, fresh new characters, and lots to do, I award Fatal Fury City of the Wolves 4 chomping wolf heads out of 5. And like I said earlier, any further findings or opinions I have on the online play or any other elements will be updated in the pinned comment below this video. I'm McMuscles, and I will see you next time.